Good day everyone. I'm John Nico Imalio from BSc 1-8 and today I'm going to report phrenology and nature theory. Before anything else, I would like to introduce the objectives of this reporting. The students may learn what is phrenology means and to identify what part of brain shows our strength and weaknesses. Okay, let's start. From Britain, phrenology spread to America and France in the 1830s and in the 1840s. It was reintroduced to Germany. It became far more successful in America. Phrenology died away in Britain by the early 1850s, but a new movement was reintroduced to Britain by the American phrenological Fowlers in the 1860s and in the 1870s. The Fowlers had begun lecturing and reading heads for fish in New York in the 1830s. Their phrenology was wholly borrowed from the British modifications of Gall's system. The Fowlers swept through Britain on a successful lecture tour before establishing various phrenological institutions, societies, and publishing concerns. Less scientifically pretentious and more overtly entrepreneurial, it is largely this latter-day phrenology whose remnants are still seen today. Developed by German physician Franz Joseph Gall in 1796, the discipline was influential in the 19th century, especially from about 1810 until 1840. The principal British centre for phrenology was Edinburgh, where the Edinburgh Phrenological Society was established in 1820. What is phrenology? Phrenology is the study of the brain by looking at the skull. From ancient Greek word phren, which means mind, and logos, which means knowledge, phrenology is the study of the conformation of the skull based on the belief that it is indicative of mental faculties and character. It is also considered as a pseudoscience which involves the measurement of bumps of the skull, especially according to the hypothesis of Franz Joseph Gall and such 19th century adherents Johann Caspar Spurzheim and George Combe. Who is Franz Joseph Gall? Franz Joseph Gall was a neuroanatomist, sociologist, and a pioneer in the study of brain anatomy. He made contributions to the understanding of brain sociology and was an early advocate for localization of function. In his public lectures, he argued that the relative size of brain areas reflected specific abilities and determined the external shape of the skull. Franz Joseph Gall characterized his primary goal to develop a functional anatomy of sociology of the brain as well as revised psychology of personality as organology. He developed what is called the anatomy of the brain, where the various faculties and abilities of the brain are located to process information around us. Now, let's proceed. Who is Johann Spurzheim? Johann Spurzheim is a German physician who became one of the chief proponents of phrenology. Spurzheim was born near Trier, Germany on December 31, 1776 and studied medicine at the University of Vienna. Gall and Spurzheim were among those two who developed the basic ideas of biological psychiatry. They attempted to identify a relationship between the structure and function of the brain. The principles upon which phrenology was based were five. Number 1, the brain is the organ of the mind. Number 2, human mental powers can be analyzed into a definite number of independent faculties. Number 3, these faculties are innate and each has its seats in a definite region of the surface of the brain. Number 4, the size of an organ, other things being equal a measure of its power. The last one, number 5, the correspondence between the outer surface of the skull and the contour of the brain surface beneath is sufficiently close to enable the observer to recognize the relative sizes of these several organs by examination of the outer surface of the head. Franz Joseph Gall identified 27 mental and moral faculties. Gall marked out on his model of the head the places of 26 organs as around enclosures with vacant interspaces. But his student John Spurgeon added 10 more. Here are those mental and moral faculties that identified by Gall and Spurgeon: amativeness, philoprogetiveness, adhesiveness, combativeness, destructiveness, secretiveness, acquisitiveness, self-esteem, approbativeness, cautiousness, individuality, locality, form, veneration, firmness, conscientiousness, hope, wonder, ideality, wit, imitation, concentrativeness, size, weight, coloring, locality, number, benevolence, order, eventuality, time, tune, language, comparison, and casualty. Here's the reason why phrenology is pseudoscience. Why phrenology considered as a pseudoscience? Because some evidences, however, have no biological proof, as they were not examined by conducting experiments or lack of evidences. The study also rejected unsupported claims that a person with a smaller brain or skull can be intelligent. The methodological rigor of phrenology was doubtful even for the standards of its time, since many authors already regarded phrenology as a pseudoscience in the 19th century. What is the importance of phrenology? Phrenology provided an attractive biological alternative that attempted to unite all mental phenomena using consistent biological terminology. Gall's approach prepared the way for studying the mind that would lead to the downfall of his own theories. Phrenology contributed to the development of physical anthropology, forensic medicine, knowledge of the nervous system and brain anatomy, as well as contributing to applied psychology. Okay, now let's proceed to the nature theory. The nature and nurture debate has raged for decades both within and outside of criminology. Early biological theories of crime were strongly influenced by Darwinian views of inheritance and natural selection and tended to ignore or downplay environmental influences. Beginning with the early work of Lombroso's Criminal Man, biological influences were dominant for much of the 19th and early 20th centuries. The advent of sociology, however, challenged these dominant explanations. There came Weber and Marsh, for example, each located causes of crime not in individual pathologies but in the way societies were organized. Now let's discuss what is the difference between nature and nurture. Nature intelligence is largely determined genetically, and that's low intelligence is linked to criminal behavior. Nurture intelligence is not inherited but is largely a product of environment. Low IQ scores do not cause crime but may result from the same environmental factors. Nature theories assert that the etiology of criminal behavior is biologically based in genetic inheritance and the structure and function of people's brains and other psychological responses. According to the research, here's the difference of nature and nurture. Nature, it says that nature is the genetic predisposition or biological makeup of an individual, while nurture is the physical world that influences the nature. Who is Henry Goddard? Henry Herbert Goddard was a prominent American psychologist, eugenicist, segregationist during the early 20th century. He is known especially for his 1912 work, The Kallikak Family, a study in the heredity of feeble-mindedness, which himself came to regard as flawed for its historic depiction of the titular family, and being the first to translate the Binet intelligence test into English in 1908, distributing an estimated 22,000 copies of the translated test across the United States. He also introduced the term moron for clinical use. Henry gathered in his studies in 1920 that institutionalized people were what he considered feeble-minded. The term feeble-minded was used from the late 19th century in Europe and United States for disorders later referred to as illnesses or deficiencies of the mind. At that time, deficiency encompassed all degrees of educational and social deficiency within the concept of mental deficiency. Goddard also believed that a range of personal and environmental factors can influence a person for his offending behavior like poverty, lack of education, and personality. For those who don't know what is a feeble-minded person look like, here's some example of a feeble-minded person. Henry Goddard made substantial contributions to American education, including the popularizing of mental testing, compulsory special education, and gifted education. His research into hereditary nature of feeble-mindedness and related eugenicist activities, however, has helped to paint the rather negative picture many people continue to hold of Goddard and his work. According to Kroner and Fort, some research has provided preliminary evidences that the individuals who are incarcerated are also more likely to suffer from alexithymia, otherwise known as a diminished ability to identify and or to communicate feelings. Those researchers have also suggested that those with an intellectual disability are more likely to commit other types of offenses, including against property and persons such as an assault, arson, theft-related, or estafa offenses. And here, our discussion ends. I hope you learned something about phrenology and nature theory. Thank you for listening. Always remember, an intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Thank you for your support. I hope you learned something. God bless you all.